memo on the sheriff to start.
We didn't either.
They're the minority, so don't worry about it.
That's right.
It's those people on the left side.
We're ready.
Is that the new color of the left, is orange?
Apparently.
They have an orange
From out
county
there
there.
with the right.
That's right.
Call the work session to order. Okay. First and only thing, application for deviating status from the Virginia Department of Social Services.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm going to turn this over to Allison, and Elizabeth Middleton's here, and Karen Gibson. As you know, when we changed the status of the Department of Social Services, where I became the policy-making board, there was another process that we felt was important to begin working on, and it's taken some time, as you can see from the amount of information that's before you, is to incorporate the department personnel under our compensation plan as well as our personnel policies. Right now, they're on the state's pay plan and under the state's DSS now personnel policies. There is actually a Orange County Social Services policy in effect that dates from, I think, the 80s. And then there's the county's personnel policy. I've been having to make certain decisions that sometimes they don't neatly fall in any one of those. And if they fall closer to the county's personnel policies, I'll do that. County attorney and I certainly consult on a regular basis with this. This would just get us under one roof, so to speak, with these practices. There's a lot to it. The goal at the end of this, if you all are subject to anything that you all would change, we would go ahead and submit our application and then go through that process, which I think involves ultimately a hearing or at least having an administrative decision by the State Social Services Board. So with that, I'll turn it over to Allison and Elizabeth to walk you through
I don't want to repeat everything in the memo that you've already had the opportunity to see, but as Brian mentioned, we've been working through the application process to obtain approval of the deviating status. We did complete a draft application packet, which will go through the state, ultimately to the Social Services Board. Ms. Middleton has been or will be meeting with our regional director to kind of get our application submitted following you all's approval, but that's where it will go from here. So you have a binder that has the complete application packet contained in it. There was a required jurisdiction-wide self-analysis form that we went through question by question with social services staff, HR, finance, admin. When we had questions, we consulted the county attorney or went to a staff person at the state Office of Social Services for clarification. But we have completed the self-analysis form, answered all the questions, provided all the documentation. That self-analysis form, if you look behind tab 2 of your binder, also has a narrative and list of appendices that we put together. Some of the questions required more than just a yes or no answer, so we developed the narrative to accompany that form, answering the questions and then listing all of the required supportive documentation. And then tab 3 contains all of the appendices that we were either required to submit or that answered a question that was referenced in the form. You should be familiar with all of the appendices listed here. The majority of them are personnel policies that are already in place and being followed today. There are a number of them that I've listed in the cover memo. 5 of them that we have recommended for amendments that are up for discussion this evening, and then 2 new policies addressing issues that kind of came up as we were working through the self-analysis. So I don't want to go through everything because, as I mentioned, most of them are personnel policies that are already adopted. but Appendix 1 is our active position classification list. We provided this, to the state as requested, but also to you for your information. This is a document that is adopted every budget year that defines the, minimum, mid, and maximum salaries for the grades. It also defines our FLSA designations and essential, non-essential designations, and the state required that we add an EEO column, so that is something new that you'll see on here. Those designations are just codes that we already had in Munis, and we were tracking for employees. We just were required to put it on this chart. So this chart, you will see, it doesn't necessarily need your approval, but we wanted you to see it with the changes, adding the EEO categories and fairly incorporating all of the social services positions as they would be incorporated at the time the deviation was approved. And this would be the document that we would use going forward. Appendix 2, again, doesn't necessarily need your approval, but it's a sample position announcement that we often use when we post new jobs, and we were required by the state. We've always listed that we are an EEO employer. We added EEO and affirmative action employer, which is a designation that the state desires to see and have us address throughout our personnel policies. Appendix 3 is the Orange County employment application. Again, it looks very much the same as it always has, but we added the affirmative action employer and then addressed some discrimination categories that are recognized by the state. Our holiday schedule, job descriptions, and personnel policy manuals or personnel policies you are already familiar with. So that's what is contained in your application packet and is what would be submitted to the state. Before we turn to the discussion on the amended personnel policies, are there any questions on the application packet?
We have to approve the policy, or the personnel policy changes, the specifics.
Yes, sir.
And we also have to approve this as for an application submission.
Yes, we would like, at the end of the discussion, to have, a general consensus or blessing from the board, to move forward with submitting the application packet as a whole.
Okay, but you need two separate votes is what I'm asking.
Sure,
Okay.
that would be appropriate.
Okay.
Any other questions on the application packet?
I know this is a lot to unpack, but it's taken a lot to get here. Some of the personnel policy changes are ones that the state has, is looking for us to do in our personnel policy. So we tried to, I guess, weave the line of not trying to change the entire county personnel practices and policies to accommodate the merger of social services. We've had to think through, what the ramifications were.
Some of these look like they're appropriate whether we were consolidating or not.
I think this exercise and my use of the personnel policy manual for the last 3 years points to a larger thing. I think we're overdue. The personnel policy manual has been in effect since 92, 94,
96.
96, something like that.
Been on the books.
And
Yes.
it really is. I hate to maybe even have to test some of the legal concepts in there.
Amen.
And so this points to a larger thing that's going to be a larger project.
Question regarding policy 2.4, number 7.
Do you want, I was gonna review each of the changes. Do you want me to?
No. that's
Okay.
fine.
If there are no other questions on the actual packet, then when you are ready to take action at the end of the discussion, we would present this through our regional director, Ms. Middleton.
Actually, I spoke to the regional director yesterday and just talked through some of the changes that we've made in the process. And she has referred me to meet directly, probably with you, and the other members of the team, with the HR managers for the state who will be doing the state's review of this material. So I have their names, and they are in Richmond, and they would come to have a meeting with us
Okay.
to submit this once we receive approval.
So that's where this would go next. Again, as Brian mentioned, when we were getting the application packet together and, we were reviewing the form and it calls for certain policies and, we had to review those policies and make sure they were gonna meet some of the, criteria that the state requires. We came across several policies that needed to be amended and then several policies that we introduced to our personnel manual for the first time. So, I'll just go over them, individually if that's okay. And the first policy is 1.2, which was our equal opportunity statement. Again, we changed that to address, affirmative action, which is, likely something that the state would ding us on if we didn't have. When this application packet goes to the state, they will review it and they'll either come back and say, you know, it's approved and you can deviate, and I'm sure there are steps to go through the, state from there. Or they'll say, here's a list of areas that you still need to work on. So that's the ultimate goal.
But this was an attempt to basically bring the county standards consistent with the state standards for personnel,
As related to social services.
as related to
Yes, as
this,
related to social services.
related to social services.
So they don't say that we have to change our entire policy, but there are certain areas that they're testing our policies on to make sure they feel comfortable with them prior to approving the deviation.
Conversely, from the Department of Social Services perspective, it is for us moving from a state regulatory document that's this thick into compliance and conformity with the county's existing practices to make it more uniform as a county department. So we're trying to minimize the changes to the county while bringing it up to the minimum requirements.
Enough to get them to buy off on it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So policy 1.2, we did amend that to include, affirmative action, and there's, just the affirmative action language in there. There are also some changes to the discrimination categories. We changed sex to gender and then added veteran status and genetics because those are categories that are recognized by the state.
What are they talking about with genetics?
Yeah,
I mean, we're not hiring clones, I don't think, so.
No, but some, for example, some localities have moved to self-insurance policies, and there is a concern that, you know, if people know the genetic history of a family, that they may be hesitant to hire members of that family in the
okay.
future, you know, because of the potential insurance impact, particularly for self-insured localities.
I actually asked this question because of my thought, is this gonna be interpreted as a self-identification of my, you know, my genes that I'm a female today? Maybe.
Yeah.
Right.
But that doesn't seem to
Genetics,
be.
it's an odd way of
You know that
characterizing
the
that.
Smith family of Orange, you know, that everybody says.
if you got bad DNA, you
You
still
know,
can
and
get
if Smith
hired.
applies, then, you know, it
You have a small
prohibits
gene pool.
discrimination.
All right.
So those changes were made there, and then just, some clarifications on old language, just updating,
Wording and things.
yes, wording changes from assistant county administrator to human resources manager, just aligning the current policy with our current practices. Any questions on policy 1.2? Other than genetics?
We learned.
We did.
The Frankenstein clause.
Policy 2.4 is our standards of conduct policy. Some basic wording and clarification changes, initially. And then when you get down to,
I was, when I first read the new words under scope there, which is all persons working for and within Orange. I mean, are we trying to apply this to contract employees? I mean, maybe you can help me, Tom, I mean, I don't wanna,
Which section are you looking at?
2.4.
2.4.
The scope, it changed from clearly speaking about employees to speaking to all persons working for and within. And I mean, maybe those are the same thing from a legal standpoint, but they didn't sound the same to me. And maybe the intent is not to be.
Well, and we wouldn't be able to apply our policies to contractors, because that would make them not contractors. Yeah, I mean,
You might wanna look at that language. I just,
Yeah, by definition, a contractor, the fact that they are a contractor means they're not subject to our personnel policies, because they wouldn't be legally able to be a contractor.
So why do you use the term for the government?
why not just
As
say
opposed to
employee,
within.
yeah, or employed, or something narrow. I mean, the intent is to only address this to employees.
Right.
I
Right.
take it. I mean,
Agreed.
we're not trying to go beyond that, okay. I'm not sure those,
Well, you could almost, is there a reason that those words were in there?
We changed the scope of policy 2.4 to match the scope of policy 1.2, which is the one that we just went over, regarding equal opportunity and affirmative action employment. So we just,
So, okay, the word is, we've been living with this scope.
right, and we recommended the change based on the consistency, but I can also understand the need to revise it further.
Let's put that when we look at the whole thing. If this is consistent with 1.2, I don't have a problem with it.
well, I think we'd be careful. We need to refer to employees,
Right. It's,
and not the universe.
and
No.
it's basically saying that if you work in Orange County, had a business, this applied to you. I mean, within, I understand,
How about if we do this policy applies to all employees working for and within Orange County government classified as full-time, part-time, temporary, or seasonal employees.
You need all that. I just say all persons,
Well, the one we just canceled, the one we just changed, this policy applies to all regular and full-time, regular full-time and part-time employees.
Yeah, I would interpret part-time as temporary too, so.
Okay.
well,
Yeah,
We'll just keep the wording of 2.4 and apply it to 1.2.
change 1.2. Is this showing?
I'm sorry?
everywhere else?
Oh, yeah,
This is probably throughout.
it's all
this-
throughout our
It is?
policy manual, yes.
Oh,
I would just say find some language that makes it clear we're referring to our employees narrowly.
why don't we just leave it as it is and not change it?
This policy revision is attached to your memo. It's not in your binder. There's only a placeholder for it in your binder until it was approved.
Why don't we do this, just for the purposes of getting, because you can see, it's like something on a sweater. It's a
Should be in your
snag and you
paper board
start
packet.
pulling it. Why don't we change 1.2 and 2.4 to be consistent?
Where did you say it is?
In your paper, in your complete board packet,
Is change 1.2 to read this applies.
Where is it in here?
right behind the work session agenda, there's the cover memo,
Should be right after that cover memo. At least that's
and
where,
then the policy revisions are attached to it.
If we use this applies to all persons working for and within the county government. That shows up all over the manual.
Right, but I would suggest just to get to the deviation.
I was looking for appendix 6, is that
No,
what we're talking
no,
about
sir,
here?
it's not that far back.
No, I'm looking for appendix 6.
Yes,
It's not in my
okay.
book.
Appendix 6 is what we're talking about. In the binder, it only has, a placeholder that
Right.
says, we'll insert the revised policy there.
And this is it,
Yes,
in its
sir.
entirety.
Yes, sir.
Maybe let's make 1.2 and 2.4 consistent, and they both will read to apply to regular full, and part-time county employees. And you'll all take action to do that, and then that'll amend those two sections for the entire county policy, and then we'll take up the rest of the scopes when we take up the rest.
We'll take up all the other policies at another time.
And it may be that these two change as well, because I'm not sure there's a clear definition contained in our policy of what a regular full-time and regular part-time employee is. Not to complicate matters, there's just not a
Well,
solid definition
Yeah,
section.
yeah, and let me, give you a practical application.
You would have to raise that.
I would change the word persons to employees.
Employee,
This policy applies to all employees working for and within Orange County,
Okay. All right,
period.
and we'll make.
I'm not trying to make it complicated.
No, we'll make 1.2 to read the same way.
yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
Okay. We've got that change, we'll make it consistent with 1.2 as well. The biggest change in, policy 2.4 is in subsection A, item 7, related to political activity. The county's current policy was employees will refrain from engaging in political activities during work hours or when officially representing the county. We added proposed language related to the Federal Hatch Act.
Why? Why?
Because it's required of all entities who are administering federal programs. It prohibits people who are administering federal programs like food stamps from, being political within the scope of their job. So I can't.
Is this applying to all county employees now?
If they're,
If they are receiving compensation, or overseeing a federally funded program.
yeah,
Which
who
is
work or
Medicaid,
receive
food
compensation.
stamps, the ones
through-
that we administer that are the federal program. We are prohibited.
When I was in King George, we had the Hatch Act, a number of Hatch Act employees were actually federal employees.
But,
But we're saying this
I-
only applies to people that are involved with federally funded programs.
Who's receiving some compensation that you can drill back down as coming through federal. And that would really only be in social services,
Or if we get,
schools, but that
would we-
doesn't apply to schools.
Not unless they have grant.
Yeah, but this doesn't apply to schools.
what about grants, federal grants?
If the program is administered by federal funds, then the Hatch Act would
So if
apply.
we're getting a grant for the fire and rescue, then this would apply to those people as well,
While they're doing duties that are paid for by the federal funds.
while they're dealing with that grant.
Right,
Correct.
but
so if we get a SAFER grant, the person that's being employed, compensated for that SAFER grant is covered under the Hatch Act, yet
You and I are.
we are not.
well, that's, the law's purpose are to ensure that programs are administered in a nonpartisan fashion to protect employees
The
from
Hatch
political.
Act is my concern,
Yeah.
period. That is a federal employee act. It's not a state, it's not local.
No, but the Fed's saying that if I give you the money, you gotta follow Hatch Act.
We already have to follow it in social services.
Right.
You know, we're required to have the posters up. You can't wear a political emblem on your shirt. You can't wear a necklace with your political emblem on it. You cannot have political, bumper stickers stuck on your walls. You can have no political activity or bias evident in your office.
How about a bumper sticker on your car?
That your car is not in your office during work hours. And is not interfacing with clients. But you cannot, the purpose of it is to not allow people to feel bullied into, voting in a certain way.
Hatch Act isn't all that tough,
I mean,
having lived under it
there's-
for a long time.
I mean, we're really talking about different things here. The Hatch Act prohibits people from taking part in partisan campaigns, which means, you're not supposed to, federal employees not supposed to have a Democrat or Republican sign in their front yard. I mean, they're not-
Or listed on the ballot as if they're,
Exactly.
if they're running for elected office.
And this is from the federal government, my God, this is the most.
This is in the state social services policy, right?
Yes, sir.
This is in the state social, so right now, social services.
It does, when we're talking here, look at the last sentence of this. In addition to local regulations regarding political activity, employees must also comply with the regulation of the Federal Hatch Act. And it doesn't seem to say federal employees administering federal funds.
The problem is, this is telling us what the Hatch Act is. That's what it's doing, it's telling us, this is what the Hatch Act does. It doesn't specify.
Well, I guess I even have a question, maybe you know this, Tom. Does the 39 Hatch Act actually limit political activities of local
Right.
government employees?
I'm actually looking it up right now.
I have my doubts, but I
Well,
don't, I wouldn't pretend to really know.
According to what I'm reading right here, a federal law passed in 1939 limits certain political activities of federal employees as well as some state, DC, and local government employees who work in connection with federally funded programs. The law's purposes are to ensure that federal programs are administered in a nonpartisan fashion.
Yeah, that's what's written here.
Yes, this language is also,
Except they didn't pick off the federal and state, they just picked the local piece.
right. And this language is from the Federal Hatch Act website for inclusion in our policy, which is in line with what is in the state's personnel policies. And I didn't include federal or state in the language because it's our local policy.
If I could just step back for a moment.
Sure.
To 1.2, where you've taken out sex and put in gender. Do we have to take out sex? Can't we leave sex in there?
We could.
If the state wants gender included, fine, but leave sex in there also.
Sure.
As an additive rather than a replacement.
Yes,
Yeah.
it would be without regard to race, sex, gender, color, national origin.
I would prefer that.
And what I find amazing,
We don't have that much time, Jim.
it even says in here, without regard to, and it says political affiliation. Yet we go farther back here, and we're now having the Hatch Act applied.
Well, it's saying that I can believe.
Elizabeth,
whatever
there is a problem here. We are saying in one spot, you can't be discriminated against on any political views. We're saying on the other, you can't have any political views.
Not exactly.
No, you just can't administer your program with a political view.
I can't choose not to hire someone because they have a different political belief than I have. But I also cannot allow them to give that political belief to our clients, to share that.
I understand that.
And I don't think it prevents, having a sign in your
Lee, you
yard.
spent your entire career in the federal government.
That's right, and basically,
And-
I had bumper stickers, I had, now I didn't have any signs, but I had bumper stickers.
Well, concern that I have is that we may as well get up and leave. Just let the state go ahead and run us. Lee, that's my opinion. That's my
Okay.
view.
That's fine.
I know it is.
It's your
And what
view.
it absolutely is, and yours is not the same as my view. But it is my view. And I wanna make sure that it's expressed
Okay,
and acknowledged. I'm not saying that anybody else has to agree with it, but I am saying what my view is on this, and I know that many of my constituents' view is the same. And that's where I have the concern, because we are getting to the point where the federal government is telling us everything that we're going to do or not do.
I guess the question I have is, the old sentence that's there says, seems to me pretty directly and clearly, employees will refrain from engaging in political activities during work hours or when officially representing the county. why do we need to say anything else about any other act?
That's,
I mean, isn't that a blanket prohibition, or is it insufficient?
Well, I'm educating myself on the Hatch Act right now, but basically what I am discerning from reading a couple of quick law journals here is it applies whether we say it applies or don't say it applies. So that saying it applies is sort of irrelevant, because if we, just reading a bar journal right here, basically, if an employee is working where federal dollars are involved, they are subject to the Hatch Act. End of discussion. Doesn't matter if we put it in our manual or don't put it in our manual. But then what's permissible and not permissible, it's a partisan activity. They can't do anything that's partisan. I'm reading New York Bar Journal here, has a nice article on it, which I thought was a good synopsis. It actually says they can actually run for election as long as it's a nonpartisan election. They can hold elective office, they can campaign for candidates of office as long as it's not partisan. What they can't do is, while at work, have a Republican or a Democrat candidate or sticker or anything. What they do when they're not at work, we don't care about. And as long as it's not a partisan election, you know, which our board, none of y'all, so they can campaign for y'all all day long and it's fine because it's not a partisan election.
You can wear a vote for frame
They can
bumper
wear a
sticker
vote from frame, they
while
just
I'm
can't
sitting
wear
here.
a Donald Trump one because that's Republican.
In that case, our existing sentence is more restrictive than you're describing.
Are
because it
you
says-
talking about while at work or outside of work?
While at work. Well, outside of work, partisan politics you can't get involved in at all, even outside of work. Yes, partisan politics.
Which means what? Means you can't have a sign in your yard?
No, well, and again, I'm reading this New York Bar Journal article, but basically what it says, and I'll tell you what they said.
I mean, you said campaigning, I wonder what is campaigning?
Can't go
Using your
door to
official
door?
authority or influence for interfering or affecting the result of an election or a nomination, so you can't, which I would say would probably include campaigning on the side.
If I'm campaigning as the county administrator, if I'm campaigning as David, voter, I mean,
Well,
if
you
I
can't-
understand the whole influence is that.
Registering
I-
people to vote would not be, would be
Well, it says using your official authority.
Authority,
If I walk in, hey, I'm Brian David, and I wanna volunteer for your campaign, the minute you go, oh, aren't you the county administrator, can we now, probably you run the risk of
Can't put
crossing.
that on your title.
well, good sense would not have me in that place to begin with, but, I think, you know, the way, I had a problem with the word refrain, I just wasn't, because refrain doesn't mean you can't do it, it just means you should not do it. I've always drawn the line, at least in administering this, whatever anybody does on their own time, as long as they're not involved with county, they're not using county time, materials, or supplies, it's freedom of speech, it's freedom of
Well,
association.
Here I'm reading part of this Bar Journal, it says, what the Hatch Act does not prohibit. Item 3, campaigning for candidates for public office in partisan elections. You just can't do it at work. And you can't use your official, you can campaign, you just can't do it in your official capacity, and you
Okay.
can't do it at work.
Well, that's what the
So
existing
we
sentence
can't
says.
wear this shirt when we show up at your campaign.
right,
And you can give money to political organizations still, and you
Post
can even give a
signs.
speech at a political fundraiser, again, as long as you're doing it as a private citizen and not in any official.
My recommendation would be to go with our existing sentence if they question the Hatch Act or wanna see something about it, we can revisit it, but I mean, why open up that when our existing statement is more restrictive? It
I
says,
think part of the purpose is to inform the employees that they're not allowed to do this. I mean, this is the manual that the employees are reading.
Well, I would read them that
Where else
sentence.
in their training do they have
But
that clarified?
I would read them that sentence, it says, employees will, maybe it should be shall,
Will not.
will refrain from engaging in political activities during work hours or when officially representing the county. Now, I don't know that you can get more
I
comprehensive.
mean, it does
Or
seem to
employees
summarize
shall
the
not.
Hatch Act restrictions, I mean, it does seem to
Yeah.
summarize.
If I could make a suggestion, Mr. White, can we just, if we're gonna do all, let's just make it employees shall not engage in political activities during work hours when
Right.
officially.
Fine, I'm okay with that, I just,
I just like refrain.
Well, refrain means to abstain from an impulse, so it covers it. I mean, it's, yeah, it means you don't do it.
They
Well,
can't wear the necklace too.
Right,
Yep.
That's
right.
not a political activity, you know, they need to know they can't wear the necklace, they can't have the bumper sticker pinned to their wall.
and that's an application thing, that if you have someone, then you say that that's engaging in, and I would interpret that as an activity.
The only thing I think we need to do, I do think we need to add, if we're gonna go with the simple sentence, employees will refrain from engaging in political activities during work hours, comma, or when officially representing the county, comma, or in their official capacity. Because you might be in your official capacity, but not officially representing the county. I mean, there is a distinction.
Yeah. My concern about having the hat check, and is the point Jim raises, employees will never know whether they're, you know, especially outside your organization. You're fine. You can just say everybody has to abide by it, but that doesn't apply to the other couple hundred people.
I've just looked at the
Here's the
checklist.
concern, I mean, I'm reading this, this is a new subject for me, I must confess.
Yeah,
My
but
quick
we're
reading
fair,
of it is, we're starting to talk about the airport, we're talking Hatchat, that's federal money.
Well, the safer grants, I mean.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
the
all
safer
of it.
races do.
Well, yeah, so,
But it-
and
but it-
what it says is that even if you aren't funded by the federal money, if what you do spends the federal money,
Kurt.
Kurt,
I have been, the advice and guidance that I got from old directors of social services early
Yeah.
in my career was never tell anybody what your beliefs are, never put a bumper
Yeah.
sticker on your car, because the question ends is, if I'm the embodiment of the Department of Social Services, you know, where is that line of separation? If I'm engaging in something in my personal time, I'm still the Director of Social Services. And if somebody knows I'm Director of Social Services, where's the line of what I'm saying, no, this is my personal and this is my professional,
Yeah,
so.
It's a line you can't draw.
Yeah, and so what I've done is I've said, I am a public servant, I'm here to serve the poor, my political beliefs for me are less important to me than my desire to serve you. And so while I'm in my career, this is what I'm gonna do.
I'm looking at the checklist we have to submit, and I see nothing in there that says we've gotta have anything dealing with political activity in the checklist. And so, I mean, it would seem that, what we already have would be sufficient.
I think Tom's edits probably should be his adding that, because you're right, official capacity could be a little wiggle room if you're not.
We'll keep
I
refraining.
think we have to say, or in your official capacity, or officially representing the county. Because your official capacity is Brian showing, hey, I'm the county administrator, I'm here, if that
I'm
can
here
be,
to help.
I'm here to help, you could be perceived as being in your official capacity, even though the county didn't ask you to go do it, and you're not actually technically representing the county.
Okay,
Good.
so how does it read now?
Well, I would say employees will refrain from engaging in political activities during work hours, comma, or in their official capacity, comma, or when officially representing the county.
Okay. You'd rather use the term shall not rather than will refrain?
Or what the backward, yeah, I forgot Brian's suggestion.
No,
Shall
no,
not.
we'll keep refraining.
Well, we can get rid of refrain. I mean,
I'm just trying to get us all on the same
I'm gonna
page.
apply it as shall
can't we
not.
just get along?
All right.
Well, I promise, I only have one more that caught me, so, and then I'll be quiet.
No. So
Page,
the whole thing on the Hatch Act comes out, and,
Right.
and since the checklist didn't ask us to do anything in that area, I don't think we need to.
page 9 of the checklist does ask if our local jurisdiction has a policy with regard to political activity that is consistent with the Federal Hatch Act. Right now, we have it
That's it.
checked yes because we were proposing an amendment, but
Does the local juris policy?
When I would say that amended language, the answer's still yes.
Yeah, it is, yes.
We can still say yes on that.
We're not referencing the Hatch Act, but
Right.
the restrictions we have match exactly
Hatch
what
Act.
the limitations are in the Hatch Act.
okay.
Okay.
So I've got Tom's edits to item 7, and then the red underlined language there will not be included.
We're on the second one now.
And just other minor changes in that policy related to our, outdated terminology.
I like the term of negative PTO.
Policy 4.6 is the next one that's related to overtime and the provisions of FLSA. We proposed an edit, this one was recently amended in 2016, so there weren't any necessary changes in this policy. However, we did recommend, I'm getting down to the appropriate page, on page 4 under, I don't know what just happened to my computer.
It's item 6,
The whole thing just turned off.
page 5.
Yes, and the top of page 4,
Oops, sorry.
I don't know what happened to my computer, but the whole
Yeah,
thing turned off.
it's crashed.
There you go.
Yeah.
Page 4.
Bottom of page 4, Allison.
Yes, the bottom of page 4, are you in the right one? That's standards of conduct, you gotta keep going.
Compensation method?
Yes, compensation method. So currently, the Department of Social Services has employees that are on call at all times. So they work an 8-hour shift during the day, and then there are 2 additional 8-hour shifts that make up a 24-hour day. And when they are on call and are called back to work, they are only permitted to receive compensatory time instead of paid overtime. As I mentioned in my memo, this is a tool that Social Services management uses to protect our budget, basically. It's hard to predict when an emergency could arise where adult protective services or child protective services or staff would have to respond to an emergency. So it's hard to predict the frequency and then how long they would be at that call. So in order to protect our overtime obligation, they can be allowed to only receive compensatory time instead of paid overtime. So we did add that under the compensation method. Their current practice is if an employee has to work over for some other kind of work assignment and it's approved hours beyond 40, they can receive paid overtime through the approval of their supervisor or the director of social services. It's only when they're called back from on-call status on an emergency when they would get compensatory time. They can use their compensatory time throughout the year. They don't lose it. It is paid out if not all of it is able to be used. And this would just align our policy with Social Services' current practice. Are there any?
The question I had, it's really the first line there, at the discretion of the county administrator and director of social services. The way the rest of that reads, it doesn't sound like there is any discretion. It basically says that you shall receive compensatory time for the hours actually worked by, if you're on call. There's no discretion. That's the policy. I mean, that's a question I'm asking.
Right.
Then you don't need to make it, you don't need to give discretion.
Right, we could just make it a statement then that employees of the Department of Social Services shall receive compensatory time for hours actually worked while on call.
And I don't know that you need to say at the methods calculated above, because it's the same as the calculation for the
The reason
compensatory time
we
above.
included accrued based on the calculation methods described above is because there are situations where compensatory time is received at the hour rate, and then when compensatory time is received at the hour and a half rate, and it all depends on your FLSA calculation. If you have physically worked your 40 hours for the week and you're called back on call, it would be at the time and a half rate. If you did not physically work your 40 hours for the week because you were out for a doctor's appointment or a holiday or something like that, it would be at the hour rate. And we described that calculation above, which is, we just put that clarification in there that it's
then
either
maybe-
going to be at the hour rate or at the 1.5 hour rate, depending on your FLSA calculation.
May I add something? I can think of one instance in my career where the discretion did come into play, and that was when I was in another locality and we had emergency shelter duty, where all employees were considered to be on call status and were brought in for extended periods of time, and the county was reimbursed by, I think it was
FEMA
funds.
probably.
And in that case, the employees were paid overtime for the time that they worked and not the compensation time, not the comp. So that, I think, is the only instance I can ever think of when it was the county being reimbursed with federal funds for an emergency situation in which all hands had to be on deck for a period of 5 or 6 days.
So the decision was made to pay them out rather than.
Because they had received the federal funds that enabled them to do it, rather than to bank it as because it was such an enormous amount of time for every employee, that was of the agency.
Any more questions?
What do we want to? What is the desire of the board on
My
that
suggestion is
item?
that number 6 read, employees of the Department of Social Service shall receive compensatory time at the rate based on the calculation methods described above.
For hours actually worked while on call.
I mean, that's part of the calculation, isn't it? Because it talks about hours worked underlined.
Go ahead.
Hours actually worked underlined.
In the calculation,
I'm just trying to use as few words as we can.
She's got me thinking about a whole FEMA reimbursement. No, because, well, here's the practical application. Ms. White, I'm fine, is that we do that. If we get money in from FEMA, I'm gonna make an executive decision.
You're offer the option to the employee, I mean, you can do all sorts of
Tom?
things, yeah.
I mean, there's some latitude I have. So,
Is that true, or would the federal government require, if they pay it up, that it does get paid out to the employees?
Well, I mean, if they put strings on it, we'll have to comply with their strings. I mean, a lot of it would depend on what the government doesn't give you money without strings attached.
yeah, the whole FEMA reimbursement for declared emergencies got a lot of strings to it, but I don't wanna turn it away. Why don't we make this change here, and then when we get into the whole updated manual, we'll make sure there's a bailout clause allowing me some unilateral decision-making with regard to this. If we seek reimbursement for personnel costs related to a declared emergency or something like that. All right, okay.
Well, the thing is, and also you can always, if a need arises that doesn't match our policy, the board can always, by its action, supersede or suspend the policy. So we always have that available for that weird, odd case.
Yeah.
We just come to the board and the board just suspends the policy or makes an adjustment for that.
Yeah, I mean, the important thing here is, in my view, has always been to communicate clearly to the employees.
Right.
It doesn't matter whether we understand it or not, that's not enough. What's important is that you use the simple words that the employees can understand, what the rules of the game are. And in my view, it says, you're on call, you work, and we've previously defined hours worked. You're gonna get comp time according to the calculation method described.
No, I'm good.
okay,
You back up.
yeah. Next policy, 5.1, we made some clarifications to our language when these were last revised in 2014. The VRS hybrid plan was new, and we were trying to develop how we were going to address the benefits of those employees. And so the scope of our policy was, you know, employees hired before January 1st, 2014. And now that we're several years into the VRS hybrid, we realized that a change really was necessary, because an employee may be hired after January 1st, 2014, but if they come to us with prior VRS service, it does not make them hybrid. So we changed the scope and listed full-time employees categorized as Plan 1 or Plan 2 under the scope of Section 1, which is for annual leave, and then the scope of Section 2 for those employees designated as VRS hybrid. The other changes in here align our practice with current policy, where we were previously not allowing, you know, annual leave to be accrued during a partial pay period, but if an employee comes in the middle of a pay period, they're, you know, it's now prorated. So those were just changed to align with current practice. We did add, if you look at item 3, it's at the bottom of page 1, top of page 2. This is a new item in our policy, but it is currently allowed by social services. So the state Department of Social Services, if you transfer from one agency to another, you carry your length of service with you. So if someone had, 6 years of service at a social services agency in Virginia and they transferred to Orange County, they would carry their years of service with them, meaning they would come in at 6 years of service, so they would start accruing leave at the 6-year of service rate. And it is a tool that social services uses when they are recruiting employees. Ms. Middleton did not want to lose the ability to do that, because it is a standard practice in social services agencies that potential social services employees would be expecting.
How does that apply to somebody outside of social services? In other words, somebody who's got a function and comes in to be working in another county and then comes into our county as a department head or something like that with 10 years service elsewhere.
That could be a recruitment tool.
Would
We
it
don't
be-
do it now, but could be a recruitment tool for the annual leave particularly.
The way we worded this, and those were questions that Brian asked when we were reviewing those changes, and because it is a difference, without this in the policy, regardless of your position coming in, you're starting at 0 years of service. And so when we worded the policy, we put that it would be at the discretion of the county administrator, so that not anyone could make that decision.
As a standard, it doesn't apply unless the county administrator says, I'm gonna use this as a recruitment.
Yes, sir. As a standard, it will not apply. It would be at the discretion of the county administrator. And we put in here that it must be negotiated and established at the time of employment. It's not something that we, it's not like a buyback where you can say, oh, well, I had so-and-so years at this place and now I wanna bring it. Yeah.
Right.
That was added under both sections for VRS and hybrid employees. The other was just clarification on.
Let me, it may be used as a factor that's discretionary. I may not, somebody with 10 years service may say, okay, we'll accrue it 5 years as a reducement. It's not a one-for-one necessarily.
Right.
Depending on how badly you want the guy or gal.
Are there any other questions on this policy for annual leave and PTO? Next policy is sick leave. Again, the scope was just revised to include Plan 1 and Plan 2 when we made adjustments. This policy hadn't really been changed since we went to bi-weekly payroll, so some of those changes were made to reflect, instead of a month, just a pay period.
I have a question. Is sick leave a benefit?
I see it as a benefit.
If that is the case, may need to look at sick leave should only be used if it is a benefit. And the reason I've addressed this, I've seen it in other jurisdictions. Sick leave is a benefit, plain and simple. Other jurisdictions have not been able to regulate the reasoning for a person using the sick leave. And just to try to keep us from getting in trouble down the road.
I agree that sick leave is a benefit because there are employers, typically in the private sector, that don't provide any sick leave. They let you work or you don't get paid. My hope is when we do an overall thing is we're gonna move everybody to a paid time off status.
Yeah.
So that there is, you need no reason to take it off, whether it's bereavement, vacation, sick, you get a bucket of days.
Okay. That's,
I mean,
yeah,
I think
because
paid
I've seen
time
this
off-
get a lot of places in trouble.
Well, and one of the reasons is the bottom of page 2 there, where it says, there is no limit on accumulation of sick leave. That's a liability that can be enormous.
And we carry that as a cash basis. The other part, I mean, you know, it comes into this whole who's immediate family member. I mean, I tell you, since I've been here, Karen, right? I've been, you know, immediate family member and, you know, different.
It covers a
But
spectrum.
I mean, there's a lot of relationships that people come and, can I take sick leave? And I just assume not.
Well, we've had an EEOC complaint because we didn't allow somebody to take sick leave for their dog.
For their dog.
But
She
now that
said
we have
he's my
genetics in
family
here,
member.
we've ruled out dogs because it
That's
has to be a genetic link.
I declared that not eligible for sick leave and then we got it.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that we were.
So, I mean, can we do that? Can we shift everybody to the PTO? I thought that the reason they went to PTO was the fact that, we actually reduced the combination of sick and vacation.
There's
Were greater than the number of PTOs.
There's a cash out basis and then you gotta keep everybody whole on what they accrued. So it's a number of localities, I can't tell you how many, but there are a couple, I know Prince George County went through this. And there was a way that they kept the long tenure, you know, people that have accrued some things whole. And then going forward, they were accruing it on a
I
PTO.
believe it's the city of Alexandria does not have any sick leave.
When I represented the city of Hopewell, they eliminated their sick leave.
Right.
And actually cashed it out at a percentage on the dollar and switched everybody to PTO over then they phased it over about a year and a half, but they literally eliminated all sick leave, rolled everybody to PTO.
It certainly gets you out of a lot of headaches as
Well,
to determining what's.
And the city of
is-
Alexandria, I take that back, they have unlimited sick leave from the day you get hired. And they have one of the lowest uses of sick leave of any jurisdiction, for the simple reason that peer pressure does away with the sick leave abuse.
The last two policies are not revised, they're new policies that are presented. The first is the on-call and callback compensation that memorializes what is already being done in the affected departments. Sheriff's Office, E911, and the Department of Social Services. It defines what on-call and callback is. It gives discretion to the individual departments to designate who their on-call employees are and how the policy will be implemented, but it does define consistent compensation for all of the departments that work in an on-call status.
Tia, aren't you on call all the time?
And
Yeah.
That's why it's important to get that definition of employee correct from the manual.
The chief deputy has reviewed and has approved this, and so is Nikki. Because we want to be consistent with.
And the last policy is a conversion of leave balances. We currently have situations where employees are accruing annual leave and sick leave and they're hybrid employees, and they should be accruing PTO. That's in social services. With the deviation, this would be corrected, but we needed to have something in place to fairly convert those leave balances to be consistent with our policies. We've also had a hybrid employee that went to one of our public safety departments, which automatically makes him a Plan 2 employee. So he went from accruing PTO to annual leave and sick leave. So we made this policy to where the conversion could go either way, depending on the changes in accrual rates and types. So that's all I have. Again, we're looking for approval of the amended policies, the new policies, and then just your overall
I would make a motion
approval.
to approve the amended policies as revised today.
I have a motion to have a second.
I'll second that.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Roll call or just?
No, all in favor.
Okay.
Only resolutions and ordinances.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 5-0.
Now I'd make a
Second.
motion to submit the application for the request for deviation to the state.
Motion, do I have a second?
So moved.
All right, motion a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that completes the work session.
Thank you, gentlemen, I appreciate that effort. I certainly want to recognize Allison, Elizabeth, Sherry Martin, and Karen Gibson on their work in getting us to this point.
Yeah, it's a big job.
Yeah. But it's sort of identified a bigger job yet to do.
Yes, sir, this is just the tip.
Okay.
This is coming to a work session near you, maybe not soon.
Okay.
Okay,
You can have this back.
man needs to suit up first.
I need to stand up. We've already been sitting since 1 o'clock.
No, I actually ran back out to work and picked up a nail gun.
Oh, did you? Oh. I moved from that chair to this chair. Wasn't much exercise.
All right. Call the meeting to order. If you would, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Wait a minute.
It's over here. We moved it.
We are creatures.
I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Replace the carpet, honestly.
Yeah,
We just kept everybody on their toes.
yeah. It worked.
They say unless you're the lead dog, the view doesn't change.
The people over there didn't make a lot of difference, but,
Violated that rule.
Okay, before we begin from the original printed agenda, we have two changes. Item 3A, the introduction of the Orange County Kiwanis Club. Jessica Sifazari was added. Also, 9B, the 2017 County Health Rankings and Roadmaps. Are there any other changes or modifications?
Move to approve as modified.
All right, motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, next thing then would be special presentations and appearances, which would be the introduction of Orange County Kiwanis Club, Jessica Sifazari.
I still don't get it right.
Say it for
Well,
us.
if,
It's, my husband says it's Sifazari.
Sifazari.
I took 6 weeks before I got married, before I even changed it, because I couldn't get the letters right. The F's and the Z's messed me up, so I don't ever expect anybody to say it right. Just sort of go with it. As long as you get that C sound, we're
we
good.
just call you Miss C from now on.
That's cool, that's great. So I am here because we are trying to get the Kiwanis Club up and going in Orange County again. There was a club here for a really long time. Don Wall, Mr. Ryder, and those guys really were the base of it, and they kept it going. And as they got a little bit older, it sort of went by the wayside. And so I'm working with my mom, Miss Walters, who was at the high school for years and years, to get the Kiwanis Club up and going again. we have decided on the name the Kiwanis Club of Orange County because we do want it to include not just the town of Orange, but the entire county because everybody can benefit from it. I was in the Key Club when it was at the high school, which was sponsored by the Kiwanis Club, and they did great work. The Kiwanis Club did great work, and so we just wanted to come and let you all know that we're trying to get it up and going again, and say we're here, and we'd like to work with you all in whatever way we can because it's a great organization and it does a lot for the community and especially the kids in the community and that sort of stuff. So I brought just a little bit of information for you, and we just wanted to come and say that we're coming back and we're here. So
How are you announcing this to the citizens?
we're just getting started. I came and spoke briefly at the Chamber of Commerce Coffee a couple weeks ago, and that's where Mr. Kircher invited me to come here and speak with you all. We are planning to have an information session on May 23rd that will be open to the public. I'm getting in contact with the OC magazine to hopefully get some information there. And we do have a Facebook page because everything has a Facebook page these days. And it's the Kiwanis Club of Orange County on Facebook for people to find information and stuff like that with what we have going on there.
Is there something we could add to our website to introduce them?
That and the newsletter that we put out possibly
Yeah.
included in there.
Yeah.
I will be glad to provide you any written stuff that you would
Newsletter's
like.
a good place to do it.
So, yeah, thank you very much for having me, and I brought information for you all, so I can leave it or put it where I'll give it to you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Okay. Next would be the consent agenda.
So moved.
A motion-
Seconded.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. New business, it appears we have none. Old business, it appears we have none. Department Director, Constitutional Officer Report, Economic Development Quarterly Report. Tommy,
He barely sat down back there.
I didn't want him to get comfortable. You gotta keep moving.
Did you change your shoes yet, Tom?
I wore my ugly business shoes, that's for sure. It was a good tour today. I'm saying, it's just cold and wet.
Where did you tour today?
We went to Marshall Farms. We're doing a significant expansion out there.
Checking
Yeah,
out
I'm
the
sure
new modern
you'll
cow
all be
farm.
there when it's up and running and working order. It's very nice. Good evening, I was chairman and board of supervisors. Come present the first quarter report for 2017, and just going over the standard numbers we have on unemployment. Again, we're following the national trend still in a decrease with unemployment rates. And as usual, we're always usually about a month or two behind on current data from VEC. Workforce center numbers are still strong, and we're seeing a lot of our marketing efforts there are starting to take off, where there's seeing increased traffic and more business participation. So we're happy to see the outcomes going there at the workforce center.
This is in our local workforce
Our
center.
workforce center, yeah, here in the town of Orange.
Question about that, Tommy. Are you seeing any trends or anything stick out in terms of matching the skills that are needed with the skills that are available in the workforce? Is there any aligning of that, or are we headed in the wrong direction, or what's your, I'm not looking for statistics, just sort of an impression.
I think the workforce community and the education community is starting to catch up to that now.
That's great news if it.
A good example of that now is just at our high school. They have increased the number of certificates that you can obtain significantly.
Yep.
And they're pushing more students to go through those. They have to at least graduate with a work readiness certificate, but they've gone from a handful of certificates to, I'd say, a number of dozens of them now. And and so it's been a good percentage of completion rates on those CTE programs too. And I think you're seeing the community colleges as well are starting to pick up on that. Another program out there now is the governor recently provided offset of any type of certification that is given in the post-high school, that they will pay for half to 3/4 of that skill set certificate that they obtain. I think depending on exactly what that certificate is. So we're starting to see the curve catch up where the education system, workforce system is trying to meet the significant demand from the local employers.
Yeah, good, that's really good news.
Website activity, we're still seeing not quite the numbers from previous year, but again, this has to go, I think, with, I sat down with our website developers recently, and again, it goes to what we discussed in last meeting, is we're getting higher and longer terms of visitation, but I think significantly lower, which is much better, and so folks are staying on there. I think in the past, we had so much content out there, so many different, it could be something about the animal shelter, that more or less should be at the county government page, that we were just getting so many visitors that were just going in and going right back out, and weren't finding it. So, but we have a few ideas of some things we're gonna do to try and increase traffic down the road with our website. I skipped prospect activity. Over the quarter, we had 11 new requests for information, and we had 5 site visits. Still feel good about the local prospect activity we're receiving, just even directly to our office. And there, I just, always have a list of activity we've done over the quarter, and I'll just highlight a couple here. Earlier in the year, I did attend what VIA does on VITA Day, met with a handful of legislators, just trying to basically see that we can maintain any type of incentives that are used for the business community, keep the funding strong. We also were approached by Wall Lumber at our industrial park for a section of walnut trees there. It was of interest to him. So we got an agreement with the EDA and Wells Wall to harvest some of those trees, and we will likely use some of those funds for potentially a disc golf course down the roads, leave those earmarked when we have the costs more firmly confirmed on that project. Also met with David Skybel, learned and toured around the Willow Grove expansion that they have going on there. I think you're going to see great continued success out there, and his interest to continually invest in the town and the community. He's a great champion. Want to help him continue his success. Met our new director for the Orange County Chamber, Lori Landis Carter. She's got a lot of energy. I look forward to working with her more in the future. We had our roundtable meeting with some of our larger employers. Had a lot of good conversation out there. Also goes back to what you had mentioned earlier on the workforce side. We had all of our major workforce resource providers there. A lot of good discussion going back and forth there. And again, just goes back to that education about the workforce center and what's there to help our major employers out.
Are our employers seeing a better situation, or do they recognize that yet, or have they not felt it yet?
I think it's too early to say right now, but they're seeing us take more efforts and strive to remedy any difficulties they're having.
You see anything in terms of Workforce Center, what they're doing to help the people that we could do better or more of?
You mean so far as the individuals?
However it would help our businesses and in the county? Is there anything more that the Workforce Center can be doing?
Yeah, the workforce community is just so large, there's so many different resource providers out there. It's just a lot of education. I think, you know, we have Amber here, and I know she's done an article on the Workforce Center. I think any continued education and outreach that they can get is kind of the biggest thing.
So it's more getting out to the community to let them know that the Workforce Center is available to them.
Correct. And saying, okay, you're coming here looking for jobs, but at the same time, if they don't have any skill sets, they, the Workforce Center will educate them on all the opportunities of how they can also go out and get some additional career training.
Okay, I'm just looking at the Piedmont Workforce Network, and I'm looking if there's anything that there's additional
Yeah.
resources or additional
Yeah.
areas that our local workforce center could get do any better by our citizens and our businesses.
Yeah.
If you've got ideas, you don't
I
need
know
to
you're
throw
on
them at me now, but if you've
board,
got
yeah.
ideas,
Yeah, I will,
Okay.
definitely. I'll pass on anything
Especially-
else that comes away.
Especially the adult population, I mean, the
Right.
students that are in high school, so you have a little bit of a captive audience there that
Right.
you can help them, but I worry a little bit about the adults. I mean, I think maybe that's partly where you were going.
well, I mean, there's funds available in terms of federal funds, available in terms of providing training, providing that, and just, you know, I think maybe more of it is maybe a lot of people don't know that, yeah, if I go there, I might be able to find some training. And that might be one of the educational things, but I'm just trying to figure out how it can better support us, and I'm not sure that, I think you've hit it on the head with better education of our citizens that are unemployed as to what the Workforce Center might be able to do for them. Okay.
Just move on a couple other items. I mentioned the round table. We had over 24 VDP representatives visit the region. There's a lot of turnover of new staff there, so it was great to get in front of some of those folks. We've begun some additional site analysis on our detention pond at the industrial park. Our VDAX grant regarding the aphid report is officially complete. We finished a architectural study on a barn out there at Montpelier. Worked with the ODA on the first ever kind of restaurant week. I wanted to help get that out there. I thought that was a good event for Orange, and hope Jeff continues to do that and take it to the next level, and see if that can take place at other areas around the county. We have a new EDA board member, Elizabeth Ross, filled a vacancy we have in District 4. And then the last thing was just pass these out real quick. What I just passed out there is our new marketing folder. Whenever we met with VDP representatives or prospects, we just gave everything in a plain orange folder. That was our marketing folder to give any type of real estate material or other information. So we now have that to look a little more professional in any type of our future meetings down the road. And that was kind of a first run. We hope to go through them pretty quickly, and we've already found a couple things we want to change on the next one. And so if you have any feedback or suggestions, let us know. But we're happy with the first outcome. I'd answer any questions you all have.
Just one question on the Go Virginia. How does that seem to be moving forward, the regional councils and all? What's your feeling on it?
Well, I think it's really starting to pick up a lot more momentum now, statewide. And the regional council, I think they were one of the first ones to officially get created. And so there's a big pat on the back for our regional, or our Go Virginia region. But I think it's going to be competitive because some of the larger markets, Hampton Road sticks out a lot because they've already had a lot of other programs, federal programs in the past where they've had to do a lot of this self-diagnosis of what their needs are related to BRAC closures. And so they're kind of already have ideas and ready to go out of the starting gates where I know our region, we want to do a lot more analysis before we find out kind of what those projects are. But everybody, we already have quite a few good ideas, I know, rolling around. We're waiting to see what comes next.
Very good.
Just on that point, Tommy and I went to the state orientation. I'm on the council for our region through the Planning District Commission. One of the things they just pushed out came today. Data, they employed George Mason University to look at each one of the regions in the state that they've designated. And it's pretty dense data. I think you all find it interesting. I'll send it out to you. It profiles our region from a economic, socio, population, in commute, wages, poverty, things. And then the council will use that to develop its strategic plan, which then will allow for projects to come forward and then ultimately go up to the state for funding.
All right. Thank you, Tommy.
Thank you.
Okay, next, county attorney report.
Mr. Chairman, this is an item, Loman just did an expansion, as you're aware, and they ran some new water line. And what you have before you is just a resolution officially making that line part of the county infrastructure, which we're in the process of transferring to RSA, but we need to first make it officially part of our infrastructure so that
We can't give a line to RSA that we don't own.
that we haven't officially received ourselves yet. So this is just a resolution officially receiving that water line from Loman. You know, they paid for it, but it'll officially receive it from them. It's in the existing right-of-way, and then it'll be part of our infrastructure.
Okay,
I move to accept the dedication of a water line.
now a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, any further discussion? All in favor?
That's a resolution, needs a roll call. Sorry.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Goodwin,
Aye.
Mr. Crozier,
Aye.
Mr. Frame,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. White.
Aye.
Okay. Next, county administrators report. Savannah Community College update.
This is just to, I guess, formally put it, that Germanna has hired Dr. Janet, selected Dr. Janet Gullickson to follow Dr. Sand. Not sure exactly when her start date would be. It's soon. And I've been asked as, from the chair of the local board, to serve on a transition team. And I think my job will be to work through her introduction through the community here in Orange. And as soon as I'm able, I will certainly schedule a time for her to come and introduce herself to you all, and then we'll work on it from there. I know the building project out at Locust Grove will have a lot of her attention, I think, among other things. So I'll just keep you posted.
From
Do we
Spokane,
know
Washington.
how she supports that building project at all? Reason is because we went from one president to another, and we changed philosophy with regard to a pool system and a physical therapy system, and I just, you know, they come up with new motivations and new objectives. It'll be interesting to see how much the planning goes from this
See if
one,
there's any migration from it.
from one to another.
I think there's enough initiative and inertia behind this one that it'd be hard to.
The other one didn't have a lot of inertia, so it was just, okay.
This is already in the queue, this project's already in queue to receive state funds here in the not too distant future. But
All right.
we'll work on that. The next item I had, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, is the county's 2017 county health rankings. I believe I passed these along to you. These came in after the regular agenda was sent out, but I found a lot of that information interesting. and thought that you may as well. I don't have any takeaways from this other than you can see how we rank on some of these indicators and outcomes. I would encourage you or anyone that can have access to the internet is to actually go to the website, because then you can actually compare Orange to any other county across the nation, across the state, and across the nation. Just for your information.
Okay. Board comment.
One item, we had talked about the catastrophic medical insurance for the jail, to see if that would benefit us at all. I believe, staff should have forwarded that to you, Mr.
I haven't
Davis.
seen anything.
Okay.
No,
It's going to be a toss-up whether it's worth it or not, based on what they do cover, what they don't cover, and your deductibles, and just like any insurance, it's not the greatest thing in the world, but we did at least get a provider to come out and give a presentation, and I'll make sure that you get a
Yeah,
copy of all
please,
this. But it's something we're gonna have to look through and see if the jail authority goes with it or not. But it's one more thing that's headed in the right direction to try to help reduce costs and, move the jail along in the right direction, so.
I guess the only question I have is, does the insurance, what it might cost someone, does it do anything to manage our liability? Or make it more predictable? I mean, right now, as I understand it, it's open-ended, literally.
Yes, and
Somebody
yes.
needs a liver transplant, we're in deep trouble.
Well,
Or dialysis did actually happen.
Louisa County is the hardest hit of anybody, but where the biggest problem are the under $20,000 inmates. The ones that go in to the hospital because their stomach hurts, or whatever, and they're not admitted. If you're not admitted or have surgery, it doesn't cover. And they've got the ones that work the game, and they go and they rack the bill up, and it never reaches the deductible because they've never been admitted, nor they ever had any surgeries. So, once again, it's administered by an insurance company, and insurance companies aren't there to help you, they're there to make a profit. So, it's something that we're going to have to look at, and, as it stands right now, if we do go with one of these policies, it's going to be equally shared in cost between the counties. That was one of the first questions, was, well, we've had low, historically, we've been a whole lot lower than Greene County. But no, it's already been agreed that if we do it, it's going to be.
Based on the prisoner days?
No, it's going to be based on 1/5 of the premium by each county.
Because everybody's at the same risk.
Everybody's at the same risk, nobody knows, and that was one of the concerns I had, was, okay, we're on the high end, are we gonna be paying a lot more than, another jurisdiction? So,
I know sometimes.
So that's for the that's for the premium.
yes.
And so, but the deductibles will be by county?
Yes, all the deductibles are individual inmates, it's not.
And they get billed to the individual counties?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Yes, it's only the policy if we do the policy.
Okay, all right.
Sometimes the application of these expenses, if they're pre-trial and they're locally responsible, when they come down with some catastrophic that requires inpatient care, I know the superintendent worked for the Commonwealth's attorney and the judges to have that person released
Right.
from custody, so then no longer the county is incurring the medical expenses. If they're they're less than 2 years and they're a local responsible prisoner doing time, then there's the same kind of drill to see if you can get them a medical release for time served, and then when they're well, they could come back and finish their term.
Or even home incarceration.
If they're state responsible prisoners, that means they've been convicted to sentenced to more than 2 years, and the state hasn't come pick them up, because you remember the state will wait a number of months
As
before
long
they'll
as they
come
can.
and pick them up.
Are these people being transported to various doctor's offices, or do they all go to the hospital, or?
A combination of things.
I've
It
seen
all
them at
depends
doctor's
on-
offices. I see them probably more often in the ER.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering, at some point, it's almost like you start thinking that it's better to have a doctor on staff at the hospital.
They do have,
They have medical staff, but it's like everything else is, they're regulated as to what they can see in-house and what has to go out.
Yeah.
And that's,
And just like most of the
But stomach
doctors,
aches, almost any doctor can see you for stomach ache.
right, and that's where they go to the local doctor, rather than to, the hospital. So,
but when there's any kind of question, most of the doctors send them to the ER. You pick up patients from doctors' offices.
But it is, I just wanted to give an update, we are working on it and trying to move forward with it, but.
we were trying to find the doctor to see jail.
Okay.
You might consider having a doctor spend a certain number of hours or blocks of time there
Right.
for non-emergency situations.
Right.
Okay. Any additional comment? All right, any question on the informational items? Any appointments to boards, commissions, and committees?
Yes, I have three. Bob McConnell, reappoint to the Economic Development Authority. Social Services Board, Nancy Richardson appointment. And the Parks and Recreation Foundation Board of Directors, Robert Anthony reappointment.
Okay,
So, you wanna do the one, and I have one, Jack Rickett, to continue to serve on the EDA.
okay.
He's agreed to serve.
And replacing him on the Healthcare Commission is Phil Frazier.
Replacing Francis Lee.
Francis Lee, yes, I'm sorry. You've already been replaced.
Did you say Phil?
Philip Frazier.
Frazier.
Phil Frazier.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And following that, I have only one request, is that if anybody knows the three positions I have for the Board of Zoning Appeals, which I have tried, and still working on someone, but, also the Library Board and the Youth Commission. If anyone knows anyone that wishes to serve, please have them contact me. Okay, calendar, schedule a public hearing on amendment to the definition of agritourism on the 23rd of May. Is that copacetic with everyone? Do we need a motion on that, or are we good?
I'll make a motion to schedule the public hearing.
Second.
All right, motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. In that case, we recess for dinner and close meeting.
Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Orange County desires to discuss in closed meeting the following: consultation with legal counsel pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body, and consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by the public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel. And whereas pursuant to section 2.23711A7 of the Code of Virginia, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now therefore be resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Orange County is hereby authorized discussion of aforesaid matters in closed meeting. Need that as a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're in closed.
Return this to Alice.
Members of the board, to the best of your knowledge, were the only matters discussed in the closed meeting, public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements, and that only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Crozier?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Is that a delay tactic?
Yes. Aye.
Mr. Goodwin?
Aye.
And Mr. Frame?
Aye.
All right, now we're down to 4 minutes.
Yep.
Oh, I can add to board comment. A number of us were at the, chamber banquet,
Why, yes.
which turned out very
One who was
nicely.
competing against me for the same wine tour.
Yeah, you guys are having
We got used. Tony went and talked to you and talked to me and just,
Yes, we did, yes, we
Okay.
did. But yes, very nice event, despite the weather trying to mess it up for a while. And then, Mr. Frame and I attended the 50th anniversary gala at the lake.
Yeah.
It was
That was a nice event too.
It was, very nice. And, Nick Freitas was there and Dave Brott was there.
I sat next to Dave Bratt. He told me stories about his phone call from the president.
At what, 6:15 in the morning or something?
He said that his wife could hear it from upstairs.
Yes. And the president was not overly thrilled with the outcome of the healthcare.
I'll tell you, the news is almost, like, what's gonna happen next?
Yes, they were. Yes,
Well,
they were.
I talked to one guy, he said that was his big appeal, was you never knew what the hell you were gonna get with him.
Well,
He keeps America on its toes,
The
and
minutes are
everybody
gonna be
else
interesting
too.
for this part of the meeting.
Discussion ensued.
Yes, discussion ensued.
Yeah, board comment continued.
Well, we, in this month, on the first, the Gordonsville had their annual fire banquet. That was they're in their 101st year. And then a couple weeks ago, you may have seen in the Orange Review, the Barbersville had their, I think it was their 61st or 62nd banquet. So it's been a month of fire banquets in District 1.
last year when the Gordonsville had their 100th, they had a really nice parade.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was
I mean,
very nice.
A lot of people from all over the places coming down for that. That was really nice.
Well, that says 7 o'clock, so.
I think you're there.
It's close now.
I'm close enough to say.
Okay, back into open session. Do we have anybody sign up for public comment?
No, sir.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any
dress
further
code.
discussion? All in favor